So in studio, we have Joe Pamper. He's the counselor here at the U.S. Embassy, and Matthew Asada, who is the first secretary at the embassy as well. Thank you both for joining us and taking questions from everyone here. You know, before I start off, of course, I know that this year's figures, Indian students, of course, make up a huge chunk, I believe, of the foreign students that are there in America. But this year's figures may not be in till much later. But there's one study that I picked up, which was there of the American Association of Collegiate Registrars and Admissions, which reports a drop of 26%. They surveyed educational institutions in the US, and they perceived a drop of applications that were coming from India. Is that something that you all have recognized as well?
We're in the middle of student visa season right now, so it's too soon for us to know, but it's not exactly a linear thing. I would say, I would focus on the fact that we have 166,000 Indian students studying in the States right now. They represent the second highest community of foreign students in the United States. 2 years ago, we had 100,000 students from India in the United States. So it's a huge growth over time.
Sure.
I would say not looking for month by month, but looking year or even years. I think we'll continue to, and we hope that there'll be continued increases of Indian students studying in the United States.
You know, as I was reading out, giving that introduction to the show right now, one realizes it's actually quite a mix of events, and when they're reported in the media, they do get highlighted. But when one looks at popular culture, because so much of popular culture really is based on emergence from America, and because of Netflix, all of us watch that, consume that. There's so much stand-up about what's happening there now politically and people's concerns. Do you recognize the fact that, you know, when we were speaking to a lot of the our audience members before the show as well, that there are concerns about the situation having changed from before?
I think it's always important to keep in mind that the first and foremost priority for any university administrator is to have a safe environment for students to learn. That's why they're going there. And so whether it's for American students, whether it's for international students, that's topmost in their minds. And I would note that while we've seen and heard about some of these real unfortunate attacks in the United States, I would note that none of these have been targeted at students themselves.
Right, because the one that became really highlighted, which was the one in Kansas of the 39-year-old techie, Srinivas Kochibotla, that was also someone, a professional, that was outside the campus. So you're trying to portray that, you know, campuses by themselves are safe.
Well, I think so. I mean, that's what, again, the university presidents are telling us when they come through here. That's what the students themselves that are on campus today. And it's been interesting. We've done actually sessions with current international students, even some that were coming back during the break, so halfway through the year. And they told us that, you know, the campuses are as safe today as they were yesterday. In fact, if not even more so, because the presidents want to ensure that there's a safe environment to learn.
I would also add to that, if I may, all of the events that we're reading about in the newspaper, they're terrible. Murder is awful. But we're reading about specific incidents, and I don't think we can extrapolate from that because of specific incidents that the whole country is not safe. In fact, the country is very welcoming. It's quite safe. Murder rates over the last 5 years have decreased, which is not to minimize these terrible events. Each and every crime is awful, and each and every one of them is being pursued by the authorities to the full extent of the U.S. law.
Okay, so that's a safety concern, and I'm sure lots of our audience members would have questions about it before. I just wanted to clarify once, because I think what's really evinced a lot of political reaction here, a lot of industry reaction has been the one about H-1B visas. And I think a lot of why I'm bringing it up here as well, because a lot of students who go there as well think of H-1B later on as an option, which will help them stay back and work as well. What would you like to say to students and to kind of address those fears or perceptions that people have about the H-1B?
Well, I would start by saying that students should be applying for student visas to get an education. We have 4,500 institutes of higher education in the United States, so there's an institution for everyone. Students who get an education in the United States get a top-class education. They create a network of alumni who will become professional colleagues throughout their careers, and they create a lifelong relationship with the United States. Speaking about H-1Bs, the President has asked the Attorney General, the Secretary of Labor, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and the Secretary of State to review our employment visas. That review has actually just begun. We don't know what it will lead to, nor do we know what will be done with the review. So right now the program is as it was. It's in place. Everyone who has an H-1B visa should be planning to go to do their 3 years of work in the United States. But for our students here, they should be focusing on education.
Sure, but you do recognize that culturally, many people look at it, the whole investment, because it's a lot of money that people invest there. People do have the long term mapped out and student loans and all of that to be mapped out. So it is something that people are looking at as well. And that's why you've had so many industry leaders. I mean, even the Google boss, he's talked about the H-1B policy. You wanted to tell us about how the recent developments have made you change your plans.
Father does not want me to go to your country for further education because of the recent crimes and murders and racism. Since Trump has been the president, it has actually increased. And that creates a fear in their mind, and they don't want to send me anymore.
What have they told you to do then?
They told me to start looking for a different country, but not US.
And you are now in class?
11th.
Class 11.
Yeah.
And so you are looking at other
and I
places.
planned for US.
So from a situation where I think India after China was the second highest thing, that you have his parents advising against it, what would you tell his father?
I would hope that your dad will reconsider. As I said, each and every one of those crimes that you have read about in the newspaper is awful. It's a crime. It's against the law. The police are pursuing it. But you can't extrapolate from that because of specific incidents that the entire country is in a different state. The United States is a very welcoming country. It's a nation of immigrants. We welcome foreigners. Certainly, universities are amongst the safest places to be anywhere in the United States. The crime rates have fallen in the last number of years. Again, I am not minimizing these terrible incidents at all. Each and every one is awful. And each and every one, I hope we catch the perpetrators, and I hope that they are pursued to the extent of the law. But your father shouldn't extrapolate from that about studying in the United States.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And I would just say, too, is that what has been very useful sometimes is for parents to speak to other parents. And recently, at our Education USA Center here in New Delhi, it's one of our 7 official advising centers here in India, we had a session where parents of prospective students could meet with parents of existing students. And they talked about some of these concerns. And I think that's a very legitimate concern for a parent to have. And I would say that try to get as much information as you can so that your family can make an informed decision.
Can you clarify on whether the firearm thing on campus, because I know there's been lots of debate about, and there are differing laws or in different states about guns on campus. So could you clarify on that?
You know, I think it's one of the things about the United States that unfortunately there are homicides that are conducted with, weapons. However, I would put this into perspective. Again, you always have to take a look at whether it's motor fatalities, whether it's unfortunate incidents that do have firearms. But again, the school is a very safe place, and the university does everything it can to make sure that the student has a welcoming environment. Some places that it might be possible, for instance, to have weapons in the environment of the university.
Right, and where should someone look for that? Because it's not something they would advertise in their prospectus, right?
No, but it's actually something that each university will have its own safety policy. It's something that you go to the website, check it out, and you can find out what the university's policies are, and you can learn about, again, what the city and state might have as well.
Okay, that's perhaps a really good idea to check out before you apply as well. Yeah, what did you want to say?
Hi, so I'm in 11th grade, and soon we're going to have to apply for universities after SAT scores. And well, in India, not every, especially for a girl child, not every parent would agree on sending their girl child abroad, overseas, for undergrad, and that's why in a lot of universities there's a preference for the girl child coming from India for overseas admission. But seeing the crime rates and racism towards Indians recently in 2016, as it was mentioned before we started the show. A lot of parents aren't willing to send their children for undergrad anymore, especially to US, maybe not overseas, that's different. And I even came across an article where there's a 26% drop in undergrad applications to the US from Indians. How does your government plan on changing that, or what does your government plan on doing for fixing that?
Okay, the United States welcomes international students, both men and women, boys and girls. It benefits the universities to have foreign students, the diversity that they bring, their perspectives that they bring, but it also really benefits the student. It would benefit you. It will push you out of your comfort zone. It will put you will be the exotic one. People will want to learn about you and your culture and your country, and you'll also be learning about them. So it's a growth experience. You come back from a study abroad a changed person, and I would certainly encourage you to think of the United States as a possible destination for university, because it's a great place to get a really first-class education. You also create a network of professional colleagues, your fellow students, who will be your colleagues throughout your career. And you develop a lifelong affinity for the United States. We call former students citizen ambassadors. You asked about crime, and it's a really good question. The crimes that we've seen in the newspapers are horrible, and they're each and every one being pursued to the utmost extent of the law. We have a vigorous legal system in the United States, and those criminals will be caught and prosecuted. That's what the U.S. government is doing about these crimes, but there has not been an increase in crime. In fact, in the last 5 years, there's been a decrease in crime. The crimes that you're reading about are horrible and thus newsworthy. That's why they're in the headlines.
Tell me, yeah.
I just want to go back to as well that there's no explicit preference for either a boy or a girl. And I think what is important, the universities are determining their own admissions policies. But as my colleague Joe said, like, the diversity of the student body is so important. So again, if that means a more diverse perspective for gender, if it means a more diverse perspective for ethnicity or parts of India, I know that it's really important when we're looking at our exchange programs that we ensure that we have people from all across India, from all religious backgrounds. And so that whole of concept of diversity, that's going to be something that the university will consider, but there's no absolute preference. I want to make sure that our audience understands that.
Yeah, it sounded a little strange to me too, having a preference for girls. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't actually mean that there's an absolute preference towards females. It's just that not every Indian parent would send their daughter overseas for undergrad, and colleges would want to welcome females because, you know, it's not that common with Indians.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay. Next question. Yeah.
So my question is not about the safety. There are many Indians who go for, who wants to pursue STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So there's an OPT period, that is a 3-year period after the graduation is done, which what I have heard and what I have read is being reduced for Indians and other nationalities as well. So won't that affect us? And like there are many students who come on who take huge loans. It will affect them as well, because that is the only time when they can work and they can pay the loan back. So won't that affect them, and won't that make us reluctant to come to US and study there?
We encourage people to go to the US to study to get a good education, as we were talking about earlier. Some of the schools do have this practical training program, such as the one that you mentioned, optional practical training. So depending on the school that you get into and that you apply to, that will tell about what kind of program they have available. It differs from school to school, so I can't give a blanket statement. The programs are still in place, and if there are any changes in that, we will immediately transmit that information on our website. But there are no changes currently, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for me to speculate because I have no idea what may happen in the future. But right now, as we're sitting here, those programs are still in place. And so if that is of interest, you should look at schools, and you can get this information from one of the 7 Education USA centers in India. which of the schools that you're interested in have these programs available.
When does the final word on the review come out?
It has actually just started, so we have no idea how long it will take
Okay.
and what they'll even do with that review.
Right. But
And it is important, too, to separate these two items. There's an H-1B process, and then there's the OPT. Again, they're not the same things, and oftentimes people club it together, but they're very different things.
and OPT is not under review.
Optional practical training is part of the student experience.
Right.
And again, that's not the H-1B review.